Okay, I'm Richard and I'm an addict. I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. Okay, I chose that reading because I hadn't read the 12 and 12 for some time, and it just, I sat down, it popped to mind to have a look at it, and I know it sort of gets a hard time at some sort of big book events, that 12 and 12, but there's some really good stuff in there, and I'm quite partial to it actually, and I thought that reading there, it sort of gives me the essence of what was required in order for me to start applying a solution in my life. The topic I was given today, by the way, was the solution. It's a pretty broad topic, isn't it? So, what got me there, and what I found is, and I'll get round to this, it's going to go in circles at some points, but you need recognition of a problem in order to apply a solution. That was my experience anyway, and what that reading says is that successive defeats and humiliations were required, so to speak, in order for me to have the humility to know that I needed help and to ask for help. And my initial defeat with that came through drugs. And Bournemouth plays a bit of a role in my story, actually. I'm not from around here, but I ended up here some years back. My cling date, by the way, is the 1st of the 1st, 2001. But getting there was a tedious process. And I'll tell you a little story, because this popped to mind when I was thinking about, when I was asked to speak here. When I was about 17 or 18, around that sort of time, quite a significant incident happened in my life. My mum, who also uses drugs, still does, in her 70s, still at it. At the time, she was assaulted. It's a bit heavy, this, but you'll get the point. She was assaulted, and the chap who did it, it was really serious, and my dad was assaulted as well, and, I came from a council estate, and, that sort of thing, it played a real significant part in getting here, and the story went a little like this. This incident happened, and my mum got the fella arrested, and he went to prison, and I felt conflicted about that. Coming from where I came from, this guy had done a terrible thing, but at the same time, you don't do that. Yeah, that strange set of values that I'd adopted. So I felt ashamed, at the same time concerned. All right? So that happened when I was about 17 or 18. And that's sort of where my using really picked up quite strongly. I remember just after that happened, I went over to Ibiza, and I came back from Ibiza about a week later, and I got back to my mum's house, and it was emptied, and they'd gone. And I sort of become, my using from there on out, and I was at it, living in and out of crack houses, in and out of jail, and that sort of thing, that kind of lifestyle. Not that I chose that, but using brought me in that direction. And some years later, about 6 or 7 years later, now remember, I've been in and out of jail several times. That's my life: smoking coke, jail, in, out. Get the picture. I'm away, and I'm remanded. I'm about 7 stone, and I'm on the wing, and this fella's there. Now, many of us who live that sort of lifestyle think we're cut out for it. Most of us aren't. particularly when you start going away and you start going away for a long time and you're faced with difficult situations. You can be like that outside, but when you're in there and there's no running, you're either cut out for that or you're not. What I found out was that I wasn't. That's what I found out. Yeah, when it really came to the crunch, with people who really are cut out for it, I wasn't. Yeah, and that was one chink that helped me. Anyway, he got a 5. It's for a different thing, a few years later. I got 4 years. He got sent to Blunderston, which is a prison in the Midlands, I think. I got sent to Blunderston. So they've come to my cell and they've said to me, Nixon, get your pack kicked. You're going to Blunderston. I said, no, I ain't. I knew he'd gone to Blunderston. So I thought, I'm not going there. I can't suffer this. I ain't got the arsehole to do it. So they said, well, look, you're going to have to go. I said, no, I'm not going. You can put me down the block. Sorry if you're not familiar with this sort of terminology, but, you put me in solitary. Anyway, they said, no, we're not doing that. So I explained to them what had happened, and, I was only 23 at the time. So they took pity on me, really, and they said, all right, look, we're going to leave you here till another transfer comes up. That took, at that time, it was driven by fear, but it took some humility. But what it did, it really put a dent in my pride. Yeah, that was the first big chink. Because I thought I was a bit of a chap prior to that. I was a thief. All my pals were so-called chaps. But I weren't really. It was just a life that I ended up in. Okay, and I weren't really cut out for that. My addiction took me along that route, and the environment that I was born and brought up in took me along that route. And that was the first big dent in it. Because then I had to stop pretending, Anyway, by chance, or by some greater force, I ended up in a jail which did a 12-step program. And I'd been to meetings before, prior to that, and it never really went in. I thought, I'm a bit too, people are washed up, or, they've not had it as hard as me, or they've had it, they're too middle class, or whatever. My mind was on the differences. And I never got it. A couple of things went in. This idea about not being able to control once I started. And I understood that. I saw that happening to me. So I went to this jail and I started on this 12-step program in there. And I got clean. And I threw myself into it, and I was excited about it, and I was serious about being clean. I was serious about most things. What I've come to learn is that without a program and without some solution in my life, I get serious about everything. I take myself way too seriously. I've become very tense. Everything's, I'm an intense guy. That's how I get. So that's what I was like. I got clean. I was going to meetings. I was sharing everything that came into my head, and I'd done what was being suggested at that point. But I stayed clean. We weren't working the steps. We were doing a sort of, program that they'd given us in there. But I was down the gym all the time. That was the main thing, really. I stayed clean for a period of time, and what I found was the longer I stayed clean, the worse I felt. That was generally my experience. And I remember sitting down with a chap in my cell at the time, and he became a friend of mine, and I'm explaining to him how I felt. I just said that there's just something not right, Steve. I just feel pessimistic, and there's something in there that's not right. And I thought maybe I've got psychiatric problems, or, maybe I've not had enough. Maybe because I'm too young, I'm 24 at that point. Maybe I've not got it out of my system properly, And I turned round to him. I'm sort of saying this out loud. And I turned round to him and I said, do you know what I mean? And he started laughing and he said, no. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, I feel all right. You're taking it all too seriously, Rich. Just relax. And I found that I couldn't relax. I just couldn't relax. But anyway, I was too scared to do anything else. I wanted to be clean, and I came out of there. I got out after a couple of years, and I ended up in Bournemouth. And they sent me back. I was on parole, and they sent me to a rehab. And I just thought, I'm not getting this. There was people coming in there. They seemed to be enjoying the meetings. They seemed to be able to talk. They wanted to talk about how they felt, and and I just couldn't get it. And I thought, maybe I've just not had enough. Maybe I'm not at that point. And being clean stopped appealing to me. And I got to the point where I thought, I'm going to use again. That's the point I got to. And I was about 20 months clean at that point. I don't know whereabouts in Bournemouth it was, maybe near Boscombe, that sort of neck of the woods. And I walked out the rehab, and a fella came round and he picked me up from there, and he said, look, I'll drive you to the train station. He said, but I've got to stop at my house. A fella called Joe the Lips, a local fella. And he brought me back to his, sounds ominous, doesn't it? He brought me back to his flat, and he said to me, look, he said, you can either stay here for a couple of days and we'll try and sort somewhere out for you to live, or you can go back to Islington and do whatever you're doing, end up using a bit of gear and back thieving again. So although that was a real overriding thought, I still wanted to be clean, and I knew what it meant to return to. I'd get nicked, I'd be back in that world, my bottle's gone now, I don't feel as confident, I'm not as cocky. I knew at that point I weren't that way inclined. I couldn't pretend. The pretense had started to go, and when you're like that, I found that I didn't want to return to living like that. I thought there has to be another way. So this defeat and humiliation had brought this to me. So he came back after a couple of days. He said, right, I've got you a place in Plymouth. Recovery then, this was 2002, the message wasn't as strong then. They weren't talking about the big book as such. It wasn't get a sponsor, work the steps. It was all a bit... There was a message there, but it all seemed to be a bit... you had to really listen and know what you was listening for. It was all a bit... what's the word? It weren't conspicuous, is what I'm saying. It wasn't black and white, and that's what I needed at that point. And it was a lot of people, just share what's going on for you. Talk about what's going through your head, and I'd defy anyone at that point to stop me doing that. If you asked me how I was doing, I'd give you a blow-by-blow account of how I felt since I woke up that morning. My head never stopped, so I knew that there weren't no mileage in that, and I thought, this is all a bit wishy-washy. I thought, maybe I'm missing something here, but I don't get it. And then I thought, being a cynic, my mind is almost naturally cynical. When I heard people up there speaking and talking about a different way of life, I'd think, you must be lying, or they'd been clean a lot of years. I thought, you kind of used like me, so it'd always be a difference. Do you follow? And so I just thought, what do I do? By chance, at that point in time, Plymouth, well, it's always been a strange place, to be fair, but it still is. But the recovery down there was very different. And it was almost like, I'd been to meetings in London, I'd been to meetings in Bournemouth, I'd been to meetings in Brighton. I went down there to this unusual place where they spoke very, if you've ever been to Plymouth, you'll know. But I got down there, I thought, Jesus, what, I felt like I was on a witness protection program. In You know in Goodfellas, at the end, when he's, you know, that's what I felt like. And I went to a meeting, and it was a different experience altogether. They were all talking about the big book. It was an NA meeting, but they were all talking about the big book. They were all very serious, but they all seemed to be doing good stuff in their life. They didn't put their arm around me. You know, they were very explicit. Look, you can do what we're doing and join in and pull your sleeves up, or not. You know, but we've got a surefire way of recovering. And this was like, I thought, Jesus, I need some of this, because my head, it's a surprise that my head just didn't explode. Literally. You know that look when you look at newcomers when they're sitting there just like that, and you know they're thinking about themselves, and their shoulders must be really tense, because that's how I felt. And I was thinking, Jesus, like, when is this going to stop? And I went in a meeting, and it was the first time after 3 years in total of coming to meetings that I identified. It took me 3 years to identify, with some fella. And the fella who I identified was really sick. And I went up at the end of the meeting, I got myself some help. I got myself a sponsor. And essentially, I'd understood that I couldn't control my using. And I'd understood that I'd start, despite all the consequences, despite my decisions, I was going to go back, and I couldn't help myself. And I'd understood that just being clean isn't a solution in and of itself. Yeah? Step 2, for me, came through the evidence in that room. It was recognition that these people had changed, and that they sounded okay, and that they would, they were all out doing things in their life. They were working, they were speaking like adults. They were at university, and they were very certain and sure about what I had to do, or what they'd done. And that for me was enough. That gave me hope. And they were saying a solution is a higher power and taking these actions. It was all very crude and black and white, but it was what I needed specifically at that point in my life. All right, and this had been a journey that had taken me there. None of this is what I would have picked. If it was my choosing, I would have gone to Blunderston and sorted that fella out. I would have carried on. I would have come out. I would have gone back to London and that would have been my solution. The solution often won't look like what you think it will. Yeah. Situations that often are humiliating and are difficult and are not what you envisage often are the best thing for you. That's been my experience. See, I needed to go through all of that to have the humility to ask for help, to get this ego out the way, to say, look, I don't know what to do here, please help me, and to be honest, and to be able to follow actions that I just wouldn't have been able to previously. He gave me stuff which you'll all be familiar with. Phone me up, tell me what's going on. I had to pray in order to do that. I'd be so worried about what they were thinking about me that I would have avoided that before. I wouldn't have had the humility to do it. Now I was open to that solution. So what they said to me was, and the other chap, Matthias, he spoke about God, and I had no religious sort of upbringing or anything like that, so that wasn't in the way. But I was unsure about it. I didn't get it, and they pointed me to the spiritual appendices in the big book, and they said, it says we find that no one should have difficulty with the spirituality of this program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. So what had happened is that because I'd been defeated, I was able to be honest about what was going through my head, about what I felt, and about who I was. I was open to their solution about what they were suggesting for me to do, and I was willing to put in action. And they were very big on action. You know, they said, look, you know, get yourself a meeting that you're going to attend. You know, start helping other people. Just put your hand out, make tea, greet people. You know, you've already got some actions behind you and it's working in your life. Start passing that on to others. Despite how you feel about it, you know, and despite what's going through your head. And that essentially, they were saying, was enough for me to make a start. That was a solution. And step 3 was a decision, essentially. You know, it talks about we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Now, I didn't understand what God was. Who really does? You know, it says that we cannot comprehend, means to grasp with the mind, yeah, that which is God. But I can do some things that will get me in line with some principles, which Fiona read out. You know, I needed some principles. So essentially, the decision here was to work to the rest of the steps and to start going against these instincts that I have, you know, to satisfy my lust, to satisfy my pride, to satisfy my material desires, to satisfy, you know, when I wanted a lie, rather tell the truth. So this is what it was. I had to start going against the grain. And that was what my sponsor said is, look, this is a simple way of you turning your will over to God. Yeah? We all know this inside of us. You know when you're doing something wrong. You know when you're about to lie, cheat or thieve, that it's wrong. You know, none of us are that feral. You know, I know it's a bit of an assumption, but I'm pretty certain none of us in this room are that feral. You know, we grew up in, you know, a Judo-Christian country, and we're given morals and values, whether they were at home or not. We're aware of them. We've got a moral compass. You know whether you're going with them or not. And there's a little thing inside of you that tells you. Previously, I overrode that to satisfy my own desires. And Bill talks about it in the 12 and 12. If you haven't read the 12 and 12, it's great. Particularly on step 4. You know, he puts it in such a good way that we're driven by these instincts to satisfy our material, sexual and social ambitions and desires. And they were the thing that was the priority in my life. What you thought about me. My social instinct. I wanted you to, you know, think well of me, my prestige. I want to have high standing. It talks in the big book about seeing ourselves as leaders. I've never met one addict who don't think they're a leader. See, we all think we're leaders, you know. Or if you don't admit it secretively, you think that. Or maybe I've got a bigger ego than most. But generally, that's the way it is. So I had these social desires. I also had material desires. You know, money was God, where I grew up. Yeah? That was the, you know, maybe it is in our society, but in particular in my house it was. You know, we were happy when we had money and we were unhappy when we were skin. So I equated happiness with money. You know, it's not any surprise that I become a thief. You know, my well-being was attached to that. So I thought if I make money and I get the proceeds of that and I dress well and I appear well, you know, that satisfies. And all these things are right, they say. He says, Bill, in the 12 and 12. But they get out of proportion. So they became the driving force in my life. As, you know, Tim and Luke spoke about yesterday in the workshop about sex. You know, sex is pleasurable. You know, dating is pleasurable. As is money, as is social standing. It's all pleasurable. But when they become the driving force in your life, and you will trample on whoever it is to get them, or you'll lie, or you'll cheat, you know, and you do all this self-seeking behaviour to get your own way, that leads to guilt, whether you know of it or not. That leads to harm. It, in my experience, it separates me, not only from you, but from myself. You know, and I didn't know how ill I was when I got here, because everyone else that I was with were really ill. You know, I grew up in an ill family. The people I knocked about with were ill. You know, so I had no real benchmark, so to speak, to you know, no role models of well people. You know, that's all I had to compare myself to. So when I got here, you know, you think just put down the drugs and you'd be all right, and then you put down the drugs and you know you're left with all this, and you know then you want a job, and then you want a girlfriend, and you know then you want money, and you know, and what my experience has been is that it's not until, you know, as time's gone on in my recovery and I'm in different environments that I start to see that I still have problems, you know. Because what happened was I went through those 12 steps and I become well. I'm joking. But in my mind I become really well. You know, one of them well people in the meeting, you know, that are always all right and that share really well, you know, and just talk about the solution, but really they're fuming, you know, seething. That's how I ended up. And I had a sponsor who was really hardline as well. And I remember going to him and saying, look, crying. I was crying, literally. And I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. You know, I'm meant to be sorted. And by the way, there was lots I hadn't done. I hadn't, like Matthias spoke about, I hadn't gone and paid back the money. I hadn't really got into step 11. I was working with some people, but really I was on to the more important things like getting a degree. Yeah, so I could go and get a job and earn money, get a girlfriend. You know, and this now was in the bag. Recovery was secured. And then as time went on, I had all this going on, so I went to him and said, it was usually in the 6 weeks holidays from uni when I had nothing to focus my mind on. I'd go neurotic again. And I'd end up in his front room saying, I don't know what's happening, Julia. I don't know what's wrong with me. And at some point, he just said, look, keep doing what you're doing. But it wasn't enough. And this was at a time when there was an idea that you only worked the 12 steps once, and you lived in 10, 11 and 12. You know, it was a big thing for me at that point. I said to him, look, I'm going to have to get help elsewhere. And it was so hardcore. Mark knows all about this, so I use that word loosely. He said to me, right, if you're making this decision, you're going to have to leave the meeting and go it alone. So, you know, tolerance and love wasn't the watchwords. So I left and I felt on my own. I was left with a couple of guys that I sponsored who were pretty flaky. You know, you wouldn't want to be left with them if you were going to start something. So it was me and these guys who I thought, Jesus, what chance do we have? And a big book. And I had this guy in London who was helping me at the time. And I went through the steps again. And they went through the steps at the same time. And it really changed the face of recovery at the time down there. There was another option for people who couldn't just do it this particular way, and they started to come on board, and that grew, and a new sort of movement came about as a result of that. And we sort of looked outwards then, and I met other people, and after a couple of years again, I started struggling again, and I asked someone else for some help. And new ideas came in. And what I found is with this solution is that there's lots here that I'd love to tell you. But I can't bring it all to mind. But essentially, the things that were really indispensable is being honest. You know, honesty is such... I can only portray a character for so long these days. I can only pretend to be all right for so long, and then it starts to really do me inside, you know. So I have to have people that I can be honest with, and that gets, unless you're in the practice of that and that becomes a habit, you're going to set yourself up for humiliation again. You know, pride comes before fall. And you know, at this stage in the game for me, I think I'm 17 years clean now, coming up to 17 years clean. This shouldn't be happening to me. How can I go to Tim and tell him this is happening. So I don't. And then the voices start in your mind, well, no, I'm not being entirely honest now, and I'm sponsoring people, and I'm telling them to be honest, and I'm going to the meeting, and I'm doing this, and then more and more voices start to build up in my head until I can't meditate. I'll start skipping prayer because I think, what's the worth? Because I'm not being entirely honest in that avenue. And then you can get away with it for an hour at a meeting, but how are you at home? And this is what Tim and Luke spoke about yesterday. How are you with your wife or your husband? They're the people you spend most of your time with. Are you happy, joyous and free with them? What are you like with the kids? Are you tolerant? Are you being a role model? Are you being a father or a mother? Are you able to overlook your own desires, what you want, in order to be of service in the house? What are you like at work? Are you trying to do a good job and put in a day's work? Like I've got a great job. It makes such a big difference if you're doing something you love. If you're a long time in recovery and you're doing something you don't like, look for something else. Really look for something else. That can cause such misery if you're not doing that. Retrain. Even if you're earning good money, if it's not making you happy, what's the worth? Because you're just going to be spending money to feel happy. You're putting the the means before the ends, or the other way round. You know what I mean? You're putting the cart before the horse. Do something that satisfies you. I landed in a job by chance, which I never thought I'd do. I really enjoy it. But when I'm not on my game, I worry more about what the judge is thinking of my performance than the fella that I'm representing. So I'm sitting there, I'm helping this guy put his case across, but all I'm worried about is what the judge is thinking of me. That Mr. Nixon's such a good advocate, and then he'll give me a sort of short shrift, and it'll ruin my day. So the point is trying to stay on top of all this. And for me, the solution is, and I've tried to do it loosely, have different advisors. And what I found is that I'll tell different people little bits about myself. No one's getting the full picture. I need one person who I trust, who's going to be honest with me, who isn't going to beat about the bush, and who I respect and admire what they're doing in their life. And I can't ring fence what I tell them. I have to let them know who I am. I have to put this out, and that takes humility, And you think that gets easier, and it does if you get into the habit of it. But your mind can keep up with you at each stage in your recovery. That's what I've found. So you have to keep going against the grain, and being honest, and then taking actions. If you're new and you're desperate, I think Chuck C, if you've heard of a speaker called Chuck C, said that his initial defeat lasted 3.5 years, and he felt complete freedom in that time from the bottle. That was my experience. My initial defeat lasted a couple of years. Doing anything that was suggested felt like a relief. It was easy, but it comes back. The ego re-emerges, and that's why people don't stay in the game. I've got by grace, by the skin of my teeth, really. I probably don't even know how close I've come to relapse at times, Not that it was obvious, but, better people than me have used, not working this program for shorter periods of time. Better men than me, I can definitely say that. So I've got by on grace, but, I need to be in the mix entirely. So the solution really looks like having a sponsor who you're going to be entirely honest with, despite how you feel, carrying out the suggestions and actions that he gives you, having a home group, turning up, being of service, and applying this in all your affairs at home, in the workplace, and working with others. Especially if you've got a good life, and you're enjoying your life. It's all right when you haven't got much on. It's easy to help others. You'll get self-esteem out of it. You'll feel good working with a new guy. It's lovely. You love this program. What about when you're married and you've got kids and you've got a job and it's pissing down with rain on a November evening and you've had a long day? You just want to go home and watch telly, or do what you want. That's the time I need to get to a meeting and think about the guy who's got, who's just come in, who's off their head, who don't know what to do. I have to get out of myself and put myself. It's not my time anymore. It's God's time. It's not my money anymore. Massive problem for me, money. I get my security out of it still. Yesterday, I came down here with my wife, Fiona, who did the reading this morning. We got married not long ago. She's a beautiful woman, and I love her. And we came down here, and Tim and Luke did an amazing workshop on sex and relationships. We both were blown away by it. We came out of here and then had a blinding row. Blinding row. She said to me, "You're miserable, you're not even excited about this. I'm going to get up and tell them what you're really like." So you can imagine, I'm in my hotel room last night. I've got to come here tomorrow and speak about the solution. How well I am. How on it I am. Like you become like a minor celebrity, don't you, in the fellowship? If you're clean for a little while, people think you're well. You think you're well. And it's easy to pretend you're well. But you can't pretend all the time. So those closest to you will feel that. So I'm lying there, I'm thinking, I've got to go and do this talk tomorrow, and I feel like a fraud, And we've had some difficulties. I'm stressed, I work a lot, I'm tight. I want the money in the bank to make me feel secure. I just want to build up the bank account. No, we're not going to spend any money. We're going to save it. So that I feel secure. I go to my sponsor some months ago and ask for some help with him. But then I don't follow what he's suggesting and start having trouble at home. And, so it ends up with humiliation. I have to speak to him and say, "Look, I need some help." And if you read 6 and 7, if you've been through the steps 6 and 7, they seem really simple, don't they? It's only about that big in the big book. It's about 1.5 paragraphs. How easy is it? You don't even think about it, do you? Your sponsor says, "Are you ready for these to be removed?" Of course I am. Of course I'm ready for these to be removed. But try that as the years go on. I think Bill says it separates the men from the boys, or the women from the girls. Try that ongoing, when it really starts to tell. When you're convinced that there's nothing wrong with you. They're not defects. The problem is Fiona. Like, her defects are glaring, but I'm reasonable. I'm not being tight. I'm being sensible. Sorry, Fee. I'm not obsessive and compulsive. You're just messy. I'm not rigid and slightly autistic. You're just emotional. So this is how it looks. It looks like that. My defects are almost impenetrable to me. I can't see it. So that's why I need help. I need to shine a light on it and hear someone else come back with it. And, you know, ask your family what you like. If you're having trouble identifying your defects of character, shit, ask your mum. Your mum will know, definitely. My mum knows, tells me regular. Your wife or your spouse will know. If you've got kids who are teenagers, they will definitely know. They'll be very candid with you. You know, they'll tell you how miserable you are, or how tight you are, or how strict you are, or whatever it is. And I feel like I'm going sort of into the... I'm not a rah-rah speaker. I'm not a motivational speaker. I do apologise if that's what you're looking for, but it's not my disposition, I'm afraid. You know. So recovery and solution for me has been, I get up spikes, yeah, and I get some learning and I get some growth, and then it plateaus. And then eventually I get to another point where something has to change. I'm in a very stable environment at the moment where my wife and I live is beautiful. We've got the in-laws who live near us, beautiful people. I live in a really stable environment. It's lovely where we live. Like we've got horses in the field next to us. It's great. I work in a very nice environment. It's only when you think that looks like salvation to you. You think a marriage or a woman looks like salvation to you. Well, I did. It's only when you're in it you start to see how much of a problem you've got. You don't know how selfish you are until you need to give of yourself. You don't know how tight you are until you need to be generous and share. You know, it's only when faced with these situations that your character is questioned. So, you know, it's not a linear process, recovery. It don't just get better and better and better and better. Not in the conventional sense anyway. Like that reading said, if you put character building first, you know, above and beyond everything else, you'll have an easier time of it. If you think that comfort and gratification and prestige is... and you'll have to have your own experience with this, you know. But you're going to be in for a surprise. You know, what looks like salvation really isn't. You know, and you either stick with it and become humbled, or you use or go mad. That's my experience. You know, it will just become too much for me. Alone, it's too much for me. You know, I'm not going to stay in this game on my own. So life will throw everything at you that you need, you know, to form your character. And it's just whether you're prepared to play the game and ask for help and draw on this program. That's my experience. And there's so much more, but I'm probably boring the arses off you. But what I found is everything... And by the way, I stopped doing this for a period of time. Like, literally. Like, admitted it. I'm not having a sponsor. I've found a particular spiritual approach now that I'm going to use, which is superior to the 12 steps. And I'll tell you why I thought this, essentially. Because this is the spirituality that really appeals to me. Feeling good without helping people. That is right up my street. Yeah? And it works for some people, I think, so they say. What I found, though, is that I go literally mental. The voices build up, so I've got a proliferation of voices, in, you know, personas in my mind that get so loud that I'm tense again. It's no wonder my head don't explode. So I need things in the way. Like I've got a sponsor at the moment, he's brand new in, he's 100 miles an hour, just split up with his wife, wants long conversations about his wife. Will it get better? You know, But he's willing as well, to be fair. I need that. I need to put myself aside and what I want to do and listen to him. I need the kids at home wanting me to do bits for them. Yeah, to get in the way of me, because it all becomes about me. And where my mind will end up getting me, it's almost like I've got a parasite in my mind, you know, and where it wants me is on my own. That's the end game for me all the time, on my own. Yeah, I feel much more comfortable there until I don't. You know, so this is it. You know, what you may think is the solution or the salvation, or you know, and it's usually comfort, gratification, sexual gratification, money, prestige, looks. In my experience, it don't work out, unfortunately, and it's a lie. You know, and I guess you're going to have your own experience with that. But what I found is I need to just stay in the mix, and I need your help. I need your help. Can't do it on my own. And I'll leave the rest to John, who's going to speak later. Thank you.
Excellent.